Once upon a time, according to Ovid, there was a sculptor who fell in love with his flawless creation. He treated the marble as if it was already the perfect woman he expected her to be. And lo and behold, Aphrodite made that wish come true, and thus the Pygmalion Effect was born. Similar to the self-fulfilling prophecy, the Pygmalion Effect too refers to how expectations can shape reality. Though in contrast to the broader range of the former, the latter is centered around other people's expectations towards you. It's a psychological phenomenon with quite some powers. Now, an expectation can't make a living being out of stone, but it can empower you to, for example, work harder to make these expectations happen, even if just subconsciously. And sadly, it can also do the absolute opposite. The Rosenthal-Jacobson study done in an elementary school in California gave some proof to the theory. Teachers were told that according to an IQ test, certain children in their class were expected to be intellectual bloomers. The teachers didn't know that this IQ test was made with a certain objective in mind, and that the so-called bloomers were actually chosen at complete random. But lo and behold, once more, the thus shaped expectations of the teachers actually made them act differently towards the apparently gifted children. And as a result, these children did in fact achieve better results in a comparing IQ test later on, which wasn't the case for the ones that weren't expected to do better. The human psyche is fascinating, isn't it? Your beliefs of a person influence your actions towards that person. Those actions then influence those persons' beliefs in themselves. These beliefs then shape the actions of that individual back towards you, which then reinforces your beliefs and expectations of that person. And round it goes. This effect can on one hand be used consciously or subconsciously for good. If uplifted and empowered by the positive expectations of our peers, we absolutely can make less of a fool of ourselves when trying to become a fitness influencer. Now, the flip side, however, can also do quite some harm. Just think of communities that our justice system thinks to be more prone to criminal activity. That expectation might change the behavior of the police, making them investigate harder or surveil more attentively, or pull over for no good reason. These actions that are shaped by negative expectations can then very well lead these communities to, in return, actually indulge in more criminal activities. Just because scrutiny, oppression, and the sheer lack of healthier alternatives naturally breed protest behavior. It's a vicious cycle. Now here's where I want to tell you a personal story of how that flip side of the Pygmalion Effect almost made me question whether I should pursue tattooing or not. Because I really like to illustrate concepts with personal experiences. I think it makes it more relatable. When I voiced my interest in this profession, I was brought into contact with a friend of a friend who happened to be an established tattoo artist. A wonderful person, truly. He was so incredibly generous to actually offer me a piece of his skin to do my very first tattoo on. It's thanks to him that I put so much importance into hygiene procedures. That I made a bloodborne pathogen certificate, even though it's not needed here in Quebec. It's sadly true. And that I place immense importance in the use of biodegradable disposables here in my own studio. So I really can't stress enough how much of a good influence he was. However, there is one thing with which he almost made the whole thing crumble for me before it even started. For my little test run, he asked me to come up with a small design. And with my extensive background in fine arts, I of course didn't want it to be an infinity sign. So I whipped up this instead. I was absolutely confident I could pull it off. He, on the other hand, wasn't. I know that his intentions were good when he told me that this is too hard, too complicated, too detailed, etc. He didn't want me to fail, and he absolutely expected me to fail with this ambitious attempt of a first tattoo. So he made me draw something else on the spot. Something way more simple. And so I did, and I hated it. And I started questioning my endeavor with huge question marks, and my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I was overly discouraged by my lack of self-confidence paired with a lack of caffeine at the time. And so I failed. Massively. And of course I will never know for sure. Maybe he was right. But I do feel, and I felt it back then, that the result would have been a drastically better one if the right expectations had been in place. From him, and as a result from myself as well. I'm absolutely convinced that I could have done this properly, because the tattoos I made immediately after that were miles away from the shaky mess. And in my defense, it does play a big role how much I want to do something. If I'm not passionate about a project, the quality of my work drops to mediocre quickly. David Bowie knew quite well about that, saying that artists produce their worst work when trying to fulfill someone else's expectations. Now, the Pygmalion Effect is not magic. Just because people expect that you can fly, you can't suddenly fly. It's all about the actions that you take that have been influenced by those expectations. Expectations can motivate you, boost your self-confidence, and hold you accountable for your actions and decisions. So fueled, we can indeed move symbolic mountains. Because more often than not, the outcome of our endeavors is a matter of mindset, and not of resources or experience. And again, the opposite too can be the case. A lack of trust and faith can stifle your potential and creativity. It can sow doubt and erode your self-esteem, which is something to keep in mind when placing your own expectations on others. Pay attention to your thoughts, because they have an impact, even if unspoken. Because even after leaving the forest for concrete jungles, we still have a sense for the feelings and intentions of others, and are impacted by minute psychological signals. And the worst is that you would never know what the outcome would have been if you had believed in the first place. So stay positive, stay open-minded, and stay curious. And on a side note, a year later I did the thing, and it was a success. That I made a bloodborne pathogens.